President-elect has been making cabinet and White House nominations and building his next administration. Some of his picks are causing a stir in Washington. Joining us now to discuss is Mike Leon, Director of Policy and Strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. Welcome, Mike. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as always, Steph. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Now, America has given the Republican Party a strong mandate to govern. What are the most significant changes that you see coming down the line, given Trump's recent nominations?
Well, that's a really good question, Steph. First and foremost, I have to look at some of these picks, and I know we'll probably get into some of them, but some of them have been ones that I expected, or at least make the most sense to me. For example, Senator Marco Rubio, a senator down here in my state of Florida, somebody who sits on a couple of foreign intelligence committees and is somebody that understands the dangers of communism, as him and I share a similar story of our families escaping Cuba to come here to Miami, Florida. So somebody like that would be the Secretary of State and handle international relations and our foreign policy agenda that the former president has about just not being involved in any new wars, is somebody that I would trust in that office. But then there's been some other folks that I don't think necessarily have the qualifications, or at least meet the standard that I think is necessary to run some of these government agencies. And before people look at, a government agency, oh, maybe there is a lot that's done in a government agency that is wasteful and spending and things like that. These are people that put our lives, and protect us and the freedoms, that we enjoy here in this country. So I'm a little bit concerned about some of these confirmation picks and the process, and maybe some of these people won't get confirmed and whatnot, Steph. But I think it speaks to overall of President Trump trying to shake up some of the governance that's happening in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, many of his picks will need to be confirmed by the Senate. Which ones do you think will be the most difficult to get through?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few to choose from. And I know a lot of people have been vocal that have actually worked for the former administration. I have been texting with people that have worked in the Department of Defense recently. I think Pete Hegseth, I've said this before on another show, jokingly, Steph, I go on Fox News on the weekend. I was a weekend producer for Fox and Friends. That doesn't qualify me to run the Pentagon, right? And I know Pete has served in this military and he's done tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, but being in charge of the Pentagon, being in charge of the largest military in the world, requires nonpartisan action. And Pete has proven that he is a partisan actor. Like, that's just, and you're allowed to be conservative and champion some Republican things, but being in charge of the largest military, it requires you to be nonpartisan. So I think he will be one of the toughest ones. I also think Matt Gaetz, especially with the House Ethics Committee, investigation into him, Republican senators like Markwayne Mullin, Lisa Murkowski have all said that Representative Matt Gaetz is not qualified for that position. And so I trust the opinions of those people that are in the House and in the Senate. And I think he will be arguably the toughest one to confirm outside of Pete Hegseth. And then if you go further down the list of potentially, Tulsi Gabbard and DNI. But I think those are the top three that everyone's pointing to, Steph.
Do you think the new Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, is going to be a strong enough ally to help Trump get through his picks?
Yeah, I mean, this is, on its surface, a very good question, because I have spoken to somebody who worked for John Thune recently. John Thune is well respected in the chambers of Congress. John Thune recently went on Fox News and Brett Baer's show and mentioned about, look, we need to get these people appointed. He was elected duly. He won the popular vote. This is the will of the people. This is what they want. Totally agree with that. The issue I have is, and again, former President Trump, who's going to be the new president come 2025, President Biden, none of them have done recess appointments over the last 8 years. So this would be something that hasn't been done, and the Supreme Court weighed in on when Obama did it back in 2014. And so I think we need to follow the conventional norms that have been set up in the Senate. I know John Thune is in alignment with that. The problem is going to be the numbers maybe don't shake up in terms of having enough votes to call a recess, first and foremost. But then once we get into the confirmation process, like we just talked about, Steph, there are people are on the record already of saying they would not vote for that person. Susan Collins is another person that said she wouldn't vote for Matt Gaetz. So this is going to be a process that is going to be arduous for John Thune. And I don't envy his position of being named Senate Majority Leader just recently, because there's a lot that's going to be undertaking over these next couple of months in his role.
It's certainly turning heads at the moment. Now, Trump he was new to Washington when he was elected in 2016. Just taking a step back, how different is his approach to forming an administration this time around?
I'm so glad you asked that, Steph. Seriously, because if you just look back at 2017 and you look at some of his appointments, some of them made sense, right? General Mattis made sense. John Kelly as his chief of staff made sense. Even Rex Tillerson, who was Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson was the CEO of one of the largest oil companies in ExxonMobil, right? So he had international relationships already and had done international trading on behalf of a US-based company. So a lot of these picks made sense. When you fast forward now to 2024, I'm a little bit concerned because some of the picks just don't make surface sense. And it's, again, going back to this, if you just translate it analogy-wise, Steph, to people having worked somewhere and then all of a sudden being put in charge of something, you don't have the experience and you haven't worked at those companies long enough to be able to overtake it and be the CEO of it. So for Pete Hegseth to have served in the military, 100%, I agree, and we commend him for his service, but to run the U.S. military, the largest military in the world, 1.93 million people that are a part of that, that just doesn't make sense. And we all should be on the side of this is head scratching. And I'm glad that there are Republicans and Democrats that have come together to say that some of these things are head scratching. Marco Rubio's not a head scratcher. The other ones are a little bit of a head scratcher.
The election season itself was full of surprises, and it looks like there's more to come. So I'm sure we'll have you back and be talking about more and more unexpected events. Thank you so much, Mike. Good to speak with you this time.
Thanks for having me, as always, Steph.